Alright, let's get right into this. So we're going to make this a quick one-off video. I'm trying to find filler videos for in between everything, and this is one of them. I've had this idea for a while. Let's make the preface of the video right at the beginning. So, this video is going to be about spec versus swiftness overall in the entire game, and we're going to make a few examples, and basically, it's a very controversial topic in the community for the most part. It is and it isn't. Like, there's a lot of people that are very swiftness-based, especially when it comes to supports. And ATK actually made a video about, Swift Bard versus Spec Bard, and I'm here to tell you why Spec Bard is guaranteed better. That there's no competition, that there's no dispute, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to go over the reasons why here in this video, so stay tuned. Also, by the way, you can comment down below which side you choose and which one you think's better, and any logic you have to add to this. And mind you that this is kind of my opinion, but I believe it's a fact as well, so let's get right into it. Okay, so basically the first thing that we're going to talk about to make this point very clear is we're going to talk about diminishing returns in with cooldown in this game, okay? And in order to get that ideology across with diminishing returns, we need to talk a little bit about the fights, about the actual raids of the game. So I got these pulled up from one of our servers. It's kind of a dead server now. We don't really use it. We were using it for statics, and that kind of just kicked everybody. But long story short, let's talk about it. So gate 1, we have different phases of the fight, and in between each major mechanic, actually let's word it like this. The preface of my argument today for the reason why that spec is always going to be better than swiftness actually has nothing to do with the stats themselves, nothing to do with your abilities, your cooldowns, the flow of your character, or your characters themselves. Keep that in mind. So again, the point that I am making actually has absolutely nothing to do with your specific character or setup or circumstances. It has everything to do with the mathematical agenda and mathematical parameters of the game itself. Period. The end. Same thing with the 25, same thing with the 30 and the 15. All of those are mechanics that guaranteed have to happen in the fight no matter how much damage you do to the boss. Let's talk about that. So ordinarily, let's say that this fight takes you about 10 minutes. And actually, I want people, as we go through this video, before we get to the end of it, to comment down below, please, as you're watching this. Pause and comment down below your average vault-in time. Okay, your average gate 1 vault-in time. Mine's about 10 minutes. I think it's actually quicker than that, but we're going to go with the 10-minute average because I'm playing the middle ground here for obvious reasons. So the points are a little bit more rounded and seasoned and both sides. Not too one-sided, not too left, not too right. Right. So, with that being said, if you have a higher damage ceiling, right, like let's say swiftness, again, I want to point out that all of these things eventually stop. Like, so if you get to 45, it's DR, you can't do damage. 40, until 40 comes, you can't do damage. I think you can actually, you can damage the wolf, that's a lie. So when the blue wolf comes out at 40, you can still keep damaging it, but then as soon as the 30 bar locks in for the next mech, you can't damage it. The wholesome point is why spec is better comparatively to swift. First, from 60 to 45, that this really only applies to content that we're over leveled for, but the reason why I'm saying spec is overall just better in the game and always will be is because the majority of the content that we're going to be doing forever will always be over leveled for. There's only ever going to be one piece of content that you're technically on par for, if that makes sense. So therefore, since the majority of the community is always going to be over leveled for whatever content we're doing, spec will always be better. Period. The end. And this is the reason why. Because the more over leveled you get, the more likely you are with a spec class than a swiftness class to skip from 60 to 45, to skip from 45 to 30 and not have to do with the 40, to skip from 30 to 25 and 15. Those spec classes don't receive the punishments that they're supposed to receive, which is cooldown, because that's what gives the swiftness classes the advantage, right, is the ability to spam. The swiftness class never gets a chance to do damage because the spec class has already hit such a high burst and they're just sitting on cooldown waiting for the diminishing returns to end to then hit their high burst again to the next max. So you see where I'm going with this? Alright, we're going to run with that though. Vault in phase 2, same exact concept, armor destruction. As a matter of fact, you have to hold till 130 here, so this one's a tough one, but I'm still going to give it to the spec class because that spec class, they use 2-3 of their burst kit between the 8 of them, right? And now that swiftness character can't do anything. They have to wait for the 130 to get the Bellator. Same thing with the 110, same thing with the 85. This one's where it changes up a little bit because technically they can go from 85 or damage 110 all the way down to 0 if they're quick enough. But again, the burst classes are still going to take the advantage. The only way they don't is if the burst class gets one burst off, the swiftness gets a few rotations off before their second burst, and they're already at 0. But again, it's the same exact concept. You skip from 160 to 130, 110 to 85, 60 to 35, and 35 to 15 and 15, or 40 to 15. And different attacks, different basic attacks that the boss can throw out at you that you don't have to deal with if you're spec bursting past all these fucking, I'm going to call them check marks. These checkpoints, these HP checkpoints is what I'm going to call them. And the reason why the spec classes are always going to be better, no matter what way you try to spin this with your dumb logic, okay, is because mathematically speaking, the way the game is designed, the way the raids interactions are designed is from mechanic to mechanic. It is designed to favor spec classes. You can argue it until the day you die, but it won't matter. You will never be right because it is a mathematical fact. It's a fact. And we're going to get into more details for why it's a fact. But let's go to the next one. Vicus. Again, another situation of where all of these things you don't have to deal with. Think about all the crap in Vicus that you have to deal with. How many more donut mechanics you have to deal with on Gate 1 if you don't get this guy bursted down to 30, okay? And do you think that the swiftness classes are going to do better in those first 10 bars of HP, 60 to 50? Do you really think they're going to do better when, like, 30, 40 seconds that's going to be a cutscene? No. No, they're not. Or they shouldn't. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to post like, oh, I was MVP over spec classes and stuff. And I don't care, because that's why I'm doing it like this. Because you're always going to have a situation where somebody's got level 10 gems or LOS 30 or just some bullshit example. Or the kid just sucked that they were against. This is math. Math for math. No opinions. No bullshit added to it. Just straight raw dog fucking math. The game design, how it is designed, and where the diminishing returns come from. Another point to preface in all of this is the reason, again, why I know I'm right with this, that spec will always be better, is the HP bars of the bosses are limited. And since there's DR moments at every single mechanic, if we're bursting from mechanic to mechanic and the HP is limited, that 10 million HP that player just hit is never coming back. So that spec for 80 million, straight down to the DR moment, that's it. That's it. That 80 million's gone. You don't get that back. And then when they're the DR moment's over and the cutscene's done and they hit another 80 million right to the next one, do you think you're going to compete with that? When they're bombing out 80 mil, skipping from mech to mech? No, you're crazy. You're crazy if you even think that this is comparable, but we'll keep going through it. It's the design of the raids. You can deny it till you're blue in the face. It won't change the math. I'm not saying swiftness classes can't do great here and that they can't thrive and they can't do phenomenal. It's saying that in a group of spec and swiftness classes, that the spec classes, if they're high enough over leveled, or if they're able to hit the quota that I'm talking about, which is even if it's 3 against 3 spec, 3 swift, if the 3 spec people can blow all the way down to 144, where she flies up in the sky and the swiftness characters are still working on their second rotation, they only got 1 rotation off too, then it's 1 rotation to 1 rotation, and the spec class, by all definitions in mathematics, should win. Period. It's the same exact concept. You skip mech to mech, skip mech to mech. I'm not going to keep going through it slowly because there's no point. You should just get it by this point or you will never understand this. These come with their momentary automatic downtimes where the spec class gets the disadvantage that they have of cooldown being too high, but because we're in an over-leveled fight, that disadvantage is no longer there. Because you're waiting for the same cutscene that the spec class is waiting for if you're a swiftness class. You're both waiting for the same one. Yeah, I'm just not even going to go through it. It just makes perfect sense. It should make perfect sense. So that's the whole case. And again, I'm making this point, but the point's already been made for me too, because the top classes on the lower thing, the top classes in Korea are Sorks, Deathblades. They're all spec classes. There's not a swiftness class at the top. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for why in the game that they're playing, the over-leveled state that they are for everything, that the swiftness classes are impossibly having a hard time to keep up. And it's due to this principle. It's due to this mathematical finite principle that the boss's HP bars are limited, that the fights are limited to a certain span of time because we're skipping from mech to mech because of the design of the fights. Right? And we're going to say swift and spec, right? And essentially what the two graphs are going to show is that spec does this, right? You're going to go up and then drop in damage, and then up and then drop in damage, and then up and then drop in damage, and then up and drop in damage, right? Because you're boom, spec, cooldown, boom, spec, cooldown, boom, spec, cooldown. But what's actually happening is at these increments, instead of having the drop down, they're actually just having a rise. Because there is no cancellation there because of some cutscene or some fucking mech to mech, next mech bullshit. So there is no downtime there. So their graph's supposed to look like this, but it's not in the overleveled content because they're just waiting for the next, the same thing everyone is, for the clown to center out or the clown to go to the top right or the clown to do this, and then boom, cooldowns are all set. And then the swiftness class graph would look something like this. It's genuinely just a gradual graph all the way up. But the problem is yes, they're still getting this gradual graph. They're still getting this, okay? But they're hitting, 10 damage per hit, right? And the spec class is hitting 20 damage per hit. And normally it would even out because the spec class would be doing something like this, right? And they'd be going up 20 and then down 20 and then up 20 and down 20, and they're just going up 10 gradually or whatever the case is, right? And it would even out. But that's not the case. What you're seeing is you're seeing spec just continuously keep rising at a hit of 20 per rise, right? The math people will get this, but the people who don't get math, you're like, where is this kid coming out of it? Like, what is this bullshit? But essentially what I'm basically saying is that the graph here, the drop-off for spec doesn't exist, especially in over-leveled content. It has nothing to do with your character, again, or your playstyle, or how good you are at the game. It has everything to do with the design of the raids, of the bosses, of the fights themselves. Once we hit that prime meridian is what I'm going to call it, that equilibrium point where the spec and the swiftness class even out, because the swiftness class is going to be ahead for a while. But as soon as we hit that equilibrium point where they start to even out, and it's both easy content for both of them, and then we start to over-level the content, you're going to see the spec class slowly start to just keep climbing and skyrocketing in front of the swiftness class. And again, it is a mathematical fact. It's a fucking fact. Someone prove me wrong, please. But yeah, so spec bar TLDR is just better, and we're going to get to that part at the very end of this. In every single fucking gate, in almost every single gate, it has a damage nerfer. Except for maybe Gate 2. Gate 2, I would say swiftness classes, because you can keep killing the outside head, could probably take the cake here, actually. Like, no, just straight up. Unless you sent a kid in that's like Omega spec for Procal and just melts it, I think swiftness classes could take Gate 2. And I think they'll always be able to take Gate 2 because of the design of the raid. Gate 3, nope. 145, 100, these are all guaranteed checks where the DPS stops, right? Gate 4, same thing. All a bunch of guaranteed checks with DPS stops. Gate 5, same thing. Gate 6, same thing. I don't need to explain it. You understand the design of the raids. And I'm sure you already got that. That is stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. And the swiftness classes can't keep doing damage, so even though the spec classes are on cooldown, it doesn't matter. Now we're going to talk about why cooldown is actually one of the biggest DRs in any video game. This has nothing to do with Lost Ark. This is all games altogether. And I've said this before, the reason why cooldown has the largest diminishing returns is because 10% of 60 seconds is 6. 10% of 54 seconds is no longer 6, it's 5.4. DR on time-based concepts, cooldown, in all video games is always terrible. So now, do you remember I asked you before to comment as we went through each of those raids, to pause and comment what your times were, your average completion times, okay? And remember, I chose 10 minutes. And if we do 10 minutes times 60 seconds, it's about 600 seconds, okay? So that's what this is right here. As you can see, if we change it, it'll change the things for us, okay? So we're going to do it on the average of about a 6-minute fight. And the reason I asked you guys to put your times is because I know there's a lot of cocky ego kids that think that their point was going to be correct by posting some sort of shorter raid time, like 4 minutes or some crazy shit, right? And that's fine. I'm totally okay with that because you just make my point even better. So now let's say you're in the ring, you're in the arena for 10 minutes with this boss, okay? And the ability that you're using has a 16-second cooldown, and you're running 1700 swiftness. So all in all, with level like 7 gems, you're getting an extra 13 skills off in a 10-minute window, right? Now let's take some time off of that because it's not going to be 10 minutes with the cutscenes and the DR. It's not 10 minutes of damage, right? Let's say like more like 8 minutes. Let's take off 120 seconds. It'll be 480, right? So now we're down to, instead of a 10-minute fight, more like a 8-minute fight. Remember, right here's where we're at, 13 skills, right? And then we put 0. And now we're only getting 4. Okay, so with just a level 7, right? So 9 extra skills for having that 1700 swiftness. 10 damage times 13 extra skills in a fight. That's what it was supposed to be. And then the other one is times 5. So it's 20 damage times 5. So we're getting 100. So actually the math says that the swiftness build will do better. It's this 2 minutes, but I didn't minus the 2 minutes accurately. I didn't take the 5 seconds off here where the spec's losing because of cooldown. I didn't take the 10 seconds off here where it's losing because of cooldown, but it's not now because it's a cutscene, right? So I didn't even do it fully accurate, and I want everyone to understand that I'm actually handicapping my point, and I'm still going to make the point, okay? So my point here is that you're inputting 1700 stat into something for an extra measly 9 skills in a fight. So let's go with that point. Let's go with the point that this is like a 2-to-1 or a little bit better than a 2-to-1 for the swiftness class, right? But that implies that he has to get off those extra 9 attacks, right? So let's go through it now. Let's just go through the Volta one. We're starting off at 60. The burst class hits a burst for, whatever it hits. The swiftness class hits its hits for whatever it hits. We're all on rotation now, all on cooldown. But all the damage we just did in that first rotation pushes straight to 45. So now me and the swiftness class are both on cooldown. So the swiftness class didn't get any extra attacks off. It didn't get any extra attacks off because we went right to the mechanic. Do you see where I'm going with this now? That's why I said swiftness classes, in theory, should be better on par. And it's funny because the math is actually proving it more than I thought. And this is some rough math, obviously. But, you know, so like every time this comes up, we're going to subtract one. How's that sound? So we're going to make a tally, right? Subtract one. Right? Because we would ideally now skip straight to 45. Okay, what's next? 30. I don't think we're going to skip straight to 30. I actually give the swiftness classes maybe 2 or 3 of their rotations here, straight up. I really do think so. Between 40 and 30, however, maybe. But either way, we're going to cut the break at 30, and we're going to throw another tally mark up there. Same thing. We're going to play it out, let the swiftness classes have their extra attacks, and then at 15, boom, we're going to hit them with another tally mark. Because, again, we're removing their advantage. The spec class is going to have cooldown, too. They're not getting an extra rotation off. They're getting the same rotations. Now, between 15 and the end is where it's tough. Because if the spec class is obviously braced to 0, same point I've been making, then the swiftness classes won't get that many extra rotations off. We're not going to dock them here because we're trying to be a completely fair person. But the reality is I should be docking them another tally here, and we're not going to. So we'll take 3 tallies off. And you know what's fun? Do you know what's funny? Without even meaning to do this, if we took 3 tallies off and did 10 times 10, it would be 100, right? So we're going to do the new one, which is minus 30, which is 100. And then it's the exact same. And again, I am handicapping my point. I'm handicapping my point to do this. See, we take a tally off, right? So we'll say 1. And then to 130, we'd take another tally off. So it's 2 tallies already. 110, not so much. Other than the cutscene. No, but there's a cutscene, actually. So, no, 3 tallies. 85 arena break. Technically an animation. 4 tallies. 60 counter. An animation with DR. 5 tallies. This is actually better for my point. 35 arena break. 6 tallies. Ghost transition. 7 tallies. Except you could keep doing damage there, so we won't count that one. 6 tallies. And then 40 ghost phase. So 6 tallies gets minus from this one. So we're not even in the overlevel state. We're not even counting all the other variables that I'm going to be adding to this. And we're minusing 6 tallies, which would bring us to 70. I'm going to do the rough math in my head. If you can't figure out what I just did, then this isn't a video for you anyways. 70. So you're already 30 under the other person. And I'm doing rough math. Remember that. So do you get the point that I'm trying to make now? And this isn't even fucking accurate. That's why this is hilarious. Like, this is actually still inaccurate to such a degree that I can't even express. But... and again, as you get higher and higher gems, it just becomes more and more not used to. It's not that you're not still getting returns, because I know I brought up DR earlier, and I can show you the DR. The DR is pretty bad here. You're losing like 20 or 30% of your gains here, stat-wise. Like, so after like 1400, you just start getting heavy DR, right? But instead of doing that, instead of showing you that, I just want you to get the concept. I want you to understand that the way the raids are designed, so this way you don't think that swiftness is bad. It's not that swiftness is bad. You can keep cascading and snowballing the swiftness. It's just that they're, you know, these guys are all talking about mid-maxing. Mid-maxing is finding that equilibrium point where you can't really benefit from something anymore because of the design of the game, and then starting to put your stats where you can still gain benefit from it. You stopped gaining benefit from swiftness at, I think, about 1200. And I don't really know that, but I'm guessing, I think it's like 1200 is where you would stop gaining benefits from it with the gem market 7 or higher. With your gems being 7 or higher. And that's my opinion. Some classes it's true. Like Paladin, the more we look at it, the more you realize that spec kind of, or Swift kind of is the only way. He's only got one option. He's been pigeonholed in a sense. But for a character that can go full spec and get damage from it, like the Bard can, boosting their damage buff, this concept directly applies. It directly applies. So, like a 5-minute fight. Straight up. Let's make it like a 5-minute fight. See what I'm saying? You're struggling for peanuts. For peanuts. An extra 4 skills in the fight. Compared to an extra 2. Like, you're struggling for peanuts. That's literally what I'm trying to get at right now. They're like, yeah, my Paladin's so much better. I have 1700 Swift. Yeah, cool, you got 3 extra skills off. That's adorable. That's adorable. It's so adorable. Or let's take, I think it's like 16 seconds for Heavenly Blessing, right? Okay, so that's actually a little bit better. You do get quite a few off. 37 versus 21, so an extra 16 Heavenly Blessings. You know what's funny about that? We're going to do some rough math, actually, though. It'd be 160 seconds because they're 10-second buffs, right? So what is that, 2 minutes? So you have 2 minutes of uptime with this of your total 5-minute fight, right? Is that right? Oh, no. You're losing 2 minutes of uptime, right? Because that's what this was. Yeah, so 1721 to 1700. 30, 16. So yeah, it'd be 16, right? Is that what I did? You get an extra 16 skills in a fight. They're 10 seconds a buff. So it's 2 minutes of uptime that you're losing, right? But let's just take a look at this. This is what I was talking about. Happy, medium, mid-max, right? Let's take a look. We're going to put this at 0. And we're going to go to 7 times 21. And we're going to do 21 times 10, which is 210. I kind of already know the answer. We'll round up and go to 240, but whatever. We'll say 210. Divided by 60. Makes up 3.5 minutes of your 5 minutes. So you almost have full perfect uptime of your DPS buff with 0 swiftness. With 0 swiftness, right? So now you just put in like an easy 500. And boom, you're kind of already up to that equal medium. 24, which is what I'd wanted. 24 would be 4 of the 5 minutes. So 4 of your 5 minutes, you're already at a full uptime at 500 swiftness. Do you see what I'm trying to say? These kids have no idea what diminishing returns is. They don't get it. They think diminishing returns is when they're just getting damage reduction on the boss. No, DR comes across in other ways too. Like wasting needed stat or important stat into something that has no fucking purpose, has no benefits to your character anymore. We have reached that prime meridian or that turnover point or whatever, the point of no return, call it whatever you need to, where your swiftness starts hurting you because you're dumping into swiftness still. And if you still can't see this, I feel so fucking bad for you, it's not even funny. It's not even funny, because this is like, again, undeniable mathematical principles. It has nothing to do with the game. The swiftness bar both charge about the same amount of time for their identity meter, so there's no reason for me to say, oh, this one's better than this one. And people are always like, well, spec charges faster. Not really, actually. Like, when you really go in Trixion and do the math where you're just spamming there versus, it's like 21 seconds or something like that versus 21 seconds, or like 2, I forget what it actually was. But it was like almost the exact same timing, because I remember I did a full endurance, but I did these tests. There's videos on my channel way back when of me doing these tests. So what's not the same is the amount of heals and the amount of damage that you get from the spec version. So 21, right? So we're going to say that this was 15s, right? And then we're going to double this. We're going to say 30, because I don't really know. Let's just say 25. Let's say 25. Let's be safe. Let's not be stupid, right? 5 times 21. Sure, it's 525. All right, now let's do 37 times 15. It's 555. So again, we're in that same conundrum where it's really close, huh? All right, oops, equals. Where it's really close, right? And that's assuming that this is only a 10% increase in damage. I actually don't know what it is. Like, I've never seen like what a damage buff from a non-spec bard does compared to a spec bard. But it's the exact same concept. What I'm trying to say is that the spec bard, in these same examples that we gave earlier with that team of 3 versus team of 3, the spec bard in this situation is going to have a bigger damage buff for that team, which means that they're more likely to hit that diminished return point, that 45, that window where nobody can do damage anyways. And then the same thing happens again in every other gate. From 160 to 130, the spec bard's damage buff is so large that it's more likely that those players are going to skip straight to the 130 mech, and then the swiftness bard's not doing anything with their time anymore. So the exact same principle gets applied again, okay? And again, remember, I undershot all of my math and all of my numbers, so if there's somebody out there with real math and real numbers, please bring it forth, because I'm willing to guarantee by game design that I am right mathematically to the detailed numbers too, not just to the ideology, which is what I'm offering. So that's it. We're going to end it there. It was pretty quick. If you get it, fantastic. If you don't, I apologize. But the reason why swiftness spec classes will always be better, or for the most part, and why spec bard is always better than swiftness bard, there is no dispute. The dispute is like, oh, well, I have permanent shield uptime with my swiftness bard. First off, I have like permanent uptime with my spec bard. Like, I run out of mana and have almost cooldown issues on my spec bard. So I'm confused. I'm just confused why you think that's not something that we're okay with too. Or we get the one where it's like, oh, your damage uptime is not as much. Again, that same principle applies here, that we don't need damage uptime if we're already at the next mech and waiting. And we're waiting for the next thing to happen. Like, if you don't get that, again, I can't explain it, but spec bard will always be better due to the design of the raids. Same as spec classes. As long as we're over leveled for the content, as long as we're ahead of where we need to be, spec will win every single time. Oh, and again, back to the shielding thing. Permanent uptime of shielding sounds like the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. It's the same argument for heavy armor, or the argument against curse stall. You run curse stall because you should be good at the fucking game, so it's not a problem. You shouldn't be using that many pots. You should just be good at the game. It's That's the whole point in the engraving. Heavy armor. You shouldn't be running heavy armor on anybody because you just shouldn't be taking that much damage. If you're just walking into mechanics and doing dumbass shit, then you're a bad player. So same logic for Curse Doll is the same logic against heavy armor. It's a bad engraving because it means that you're bad at the game, right? And then third, same logic for the permanent shielding uptime. If you're a player that needs to permanently shield your teammates, then your teammates suck. There's no other way to say that, period. So now that that has been established, I will say that swiftness for the average players, for the pugs, probably going to always be the way to go. But for a coordinated, calculated efficiency, bang versus bang group, the spec class is undeniably, indefinitely, and always will be the better way to go. Period. The end. Okay? So spec bard for the win. And again, these are numbers. These are mathematical principles that you just can't deny. You can pretend. You can delusionally pretend, but you cannot deny these concepts. Again, like, comment, subscribe. Leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, you didn't learn anything. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is another Evolve Mental Moment. I really appreciate your patience with the videos coming out. And yeah, tune in next time. So I'll catch you guys later.
Let's go! Yeah, public enemy number one. When we mobbing, trouble in the streets, here we come with a spotting. Public enemy number one. And we mobbing, bring it along. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Trouble on the way. I want my revenge. Welcome to the payday. Hungry for destruction. Crazy for the cray. Better clear the exits. Make a way to vacate. Ready to rage a riot. I wanna raise a silence. Yeah. Living the safe in 5 minutes with being a silent. Yeah. They wanna make us quiet. Breaking the cage of silence. Yeah. They wanna make compliance. We gon' respect the fire. Yeah. Time to write a new code. Let's let the rules go. Show them why they name us public enemy. Uno. Yeah. They say we ruthless. We savage. Yeah. There's a method to the madness. Yeah. They say we psycho, the baddest. There's a method to the madness. 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 Yeah, but there's a method to the madness. We gon' do it our way, never needed the kudos. Kill 'em with the chaos, only way that we do know. Lawless and ruthless, that's a dynamic duo. That we get the job done while you running your food hole.